Chair, fellow speakers, yes. According to Sidney Sheldon, death is the number 2 fear. Public speaking is number 1. I disagree. No one is really afraid of public speaking. Let me explain. I'll divide this into the fear, the public, and the speaker. Fear is the feeling that you would have if you were suddenly in front of a lion and you're feeling the fight, flight, freeze reflex whilst your brain is attempting to figure out how on earth you get out of the situation that you found yourself in. According to the Collins Dictionary, I quote, "Fear is an unpleasant feeling you have when you think you are in danger." Think being the operative word, and I will come back to this. Now let's have a look at the public. An audience is formed of a person just like you, sat next to a person just like you, sat next to a person just like you. Even in the times when you have to be 2 meters apart. So at what point does one person sat next to another person become one person too many? And as you're now the audience, how would you deal with a speaker, even a bad one? Are you likely to put them in any danger? Well, there was a time when people would throw tomatoes, but even that wouldn't hurt. So, in most cases, even if you're very famous, you're not likely to be in any real danger from the public. So finally, the speaker. If you consider what you're scared of and rationalise it, as I've just done, you'll realise that it doesn't make sense, but that doesn't change the feeling. And that's because you cannot rationalise a feeling. As Blaise Pascal put it, le cœur a les raisons que la raison n'a pas. The heart has its reason, which reason knows nothing of. I was not afraid of public speaking, but when it came to reading in public, now that was a completely different matter. I know what people think they experience when it comes to public speaking, because my heart would race, my knees would tremble, I would sweat at the thought of even having to read in public. Yes. Because I remember the first time this happened to me in primary school. I felt humiliated, ashamed, ridiculed. That was my experience of public reading. And I made an association with the situation and my feeling. 20 years later, it still brought back that same sense of vulnerability that I had. That was the connection. I felt vulnerable because as a child, if you're not part of the group, there's danger. But as an adult, that doesn't hold true anymore. Chances are you can remember, like me, the first time you recall having this feeling that you might call fear of public speaking. That feeling came after the event, after the first time you experienced that sense of fear. And as the definition stated, fear is the unpleasant feeling that you get when you think you are in danger. So what's happening now is because the brain does not recognize the difference between something that's imaginary, thought, or an image, you are recreating a sense of danger which doesn't actually exist. Hence, the blockbusters of Hitchcock thrillers. You are now experiencing a feeling before anything has actually happened. It's only in your imagination. The way I like to describe it is the first time you saw a real lion. Every time after that, you're only seeing an image, a picture, or a photograph of a lion. And that is in your mind. And once you recognize that it's only an image, there is no longer anything to be afraid of. And as Roosevelt said, there is nothing greater to fear than fear itself. I do hope this has helped you to understand that no one is really afraid of public speaking. So it is not the public, the fear, the audience, or the speaking that we're afraid of. It's the association that we have made in our mind between a situation that happened the first time this happened and an event. René Descartes put it that except our own thoughts, there is nothing absolutely in our power. And if we can allow ourselves to stay present, feel our vulnerability, accept ourselves for who and what we are, with all our foibles and our imperfections, then our thoughts and feelings will change, and so will our perceived fear of public speaking, or anything else for that matter.
Judy, thank you very much. Were you happy to take some questions?
Yes.
Any questions for Judy?
Question. The fear. Does your fear become less internally because you are now more used to the acceptance of standing up in front and speaking in front of people? Are you more deadened to the fear? Repetition.
It's not through practice necessarily. It's the practice enables, my perspective is the practice enables us to accept that we are not perfect and that we are on a journey. So we're accepting our vulnerability, and that's the shift that happens. And there's also a shift between thinking of a fear, which was in my speech about the gift and the gift of fear, which happens even before you recognize that you are in danger, and that's it's actually called the eighth sense, or rather what people call the sixth sense, but it's actually our eighth sense, and that's about our awareness of the environment, and that's a real sense of fear, but we don't necessarily perceive what the danger is. Anything else is actually anxiety. And that's the distinction between recognizing our own anxiety about an event and that it's okay for us to feel this feeling and a true fear. Does that make sense?
So, do you believe that fear of public speaking is a learned response or a genetically programmed response?
It's a learned response from being in a situation where there is a perceived negative outcome the first time it happens.
The first time it happens.
So it's the first time that it happens, this becomes a learnt pattern, whatever scenario that didn't work out at that age, and it's usually before age 7, becomes the model, because you survived that scenario, becomes the model for any other situation. As I was never afraid of public speaking, and I knew the audience, was nothing for me to be afraid of. But reading, I've associated with being ridiculed, so that became a problem. I knew it was never an audience because I could do dance and gymnastics and drama because I knew my lines. I'd already read them. And so that led me to think about, so what happens with public speaking? And that's how I kind of unraveled this whole situation, that it's not the fear of public speaking itself, it's that learned pattern that may have happened at school with public speaking, but in my case it was reading, and then it just becomes a learned pattern. And it's the same for any anxiety.
Julia, so you mentioned about reading as a child, that was like the trigger. Do you still have that issue now? I mean, what situations do we have to read out loud to?
The first time I did a speech was effectively brought back my own sense. Oh, I have something that's written here, and I don't know it off by heart. It wasn't acting, drama.
Did you struggle?
So it felt like I was reading, but I'd already done a lot of work around reading.
Right.
It was called a speaking club, but for me it was about reading. Because as I said, I have no fear of public speaking. Topics doesn't scare me, because I don't have to follow a particular model. So the whole anxiety is different.
Yeah.
So.
I found it really interesting because it's a complete reversal of my situation where I've always had lots of confidence in reading. I was reading before I went to school and was reading all these books to them and chosen to stand out in front of the hall to read because I was told that I had a loud voice and they could hear it well in the back row. Which I took as a compliment, but I don't know whether it was. But yeah, definitely. But it was only a few years back when I was told only read what's on the script. Don't add this. Don't add bits in. And it had been so rubbed in, stick to what's down, that I was scared of deviating from what was written and having to have what was written in front. Something written in front, I'd stand up as confident as anything. But if it wasn't there, I would.
That's the thing.
Opposite.
That first experience, you interpreted being able to be heard at the back as positive.
Yes.
But if we interpret it as a negative, then as a child, because you cannot rationalise up to age 7.
No.
And so everything then gets taken literally, and how we then interpret that as being a positive or negative determines.
I mean, I took having a loud voice as being good.
Any more? So we'll have a vote. You have to go stand in the corner, Julie. Well, that's a good idea. So, ladies and gents, can you raise your hand if you felt as though you were informed by Julie's speech?
I heard that.
You had a unanimous response from the group. Very good.